world is moving faster every day. To make sure you're in control, you're connected 24/7, making plans, doing deals, wherever you are in the world. And as situations develop, you might need to be somewhere else fast. That's where the new Victor app comes in. It's designed to make chartering a private jet faster and simpler than ever before. It puts the widest choice of jets, routes, and prices at your fingertips, so you can be ready to fly within 3 hours. It takes seconds to request a quote. Our smart technology finds the best aircraft available, and it's simple to compare the actual aircraft and operators side by side. Our transparent booking process gives you the confidence to choose the best aircraft and operator at the right price. With a fixed booking fee, no hidden costs or unexpected surcharges, we are confident our quotes won't be beaten. Your itinerary gives you everything you need to fly, including the tail number and the name of the captain, along with any updates to your schedule. We even send you directions from your location to your private departure terminal. And one touch puts you straight through to our flight services team. It's simple to share with other passengers too. So from the moment you tap into the app to the moment you touch down, you'll feel totally connected and in control. The new Victor app makes jet chartering faster and simpler than ever before. That's what we mean when we say, fly smarter.
Very good. So we'll structure this. I think Clive will talk for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have an interactive discussion. So please be ready and to ask some poignant questions. So without further ado, Clive Jackson.
Yep, mic's on.
All right.
Okay, well, can you all hear me on this mic? Is that good? Well, listen, it's great to be here at the Aalto University. This is actually my second time in 3 years. The first time was when Will just started to get the program going. And it's great to be in a country that is known for such fantastic tech innovation, because I've had the pleasure of working with a number of people out of Finland over the last decade, and it has been really inspiring. So, Will, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the opportunity to really share some of my experiences over the last 20 years. I can't believe that I started my first digital company in 1993. It was really sort of pre the age of the internet, when we were using dial-up modems, Wildcat bulletin boards, and something called the first 3.5-inch floppy disk came out, and I was writing software for that. Software in 1.4 megabytes. So today, I don't think you can download an image from the internet in under 1.4 meg. So what I want to do is share some of my experiences. This is not a startup masterclass. I'm not here to do that. I don't feel I'm qualified to do that. I think I've been in the game a while, and that's kind of weird to imagine that you've been in perpetual startup or early stage mode for the last 20 years, albeit with some different companies. But it is still hugely fun and hugely exhilarating. So what I wanted to say tonight about the rules of the game here, that I will talk openly about anything and everything. There may be a few names that I mentioned, so I would ask you not to tweet those names. You might get me sued. So please don't do that. But anything else is open for you guys to Twitter or blog about by all means. What I am going to talk about is what's worked for me over some 14 companies, 10 of which I've started. And the rest I've bought. I've sold a few, successfully exited, and out of that 14, I've also had to close 3 down that didn't work. And part of that process was closing things down and doing it in an orderly way and making sure everyone got looked after. So it isn't a catalogue of perfect success. You can't expect that. It never should be. But one thing's for sure, you get to learn from that. So I'd like to just start with a little questionnaire for you guys, which is why Will brought you all to the front of the stage. So how many people here are what they would consider, or you would consider, an entrepreneur, either with an idea, a business plan, something in situ, or something that they want to get going? Can I have a showing of hands? Fantastic, fantastic. Over half the audience. All right. The other point I'd like to ask, in a country like Finland, where work-life balance is so important, How many of you feel that a work-life balance is important? Okay, same number. All right, that's interesting. We'll come back to that. All right, I'm going to just go through a series of thoughts here. Take away from it what you like, discard whatever you wish, but I just wanted to overlay what you probably already have gone through in terms of looking at the startup game, the whole cycle that goes around that and the processes that you go through from the idea to the MVP, etc., and just overlay what I found to be particularly relevant in that process, as I said, of having done it a couple of times. And the first one that I want to focus on is not what the idea is, because that's what you guys do as entrepreneurs. You come up with the idea, whatever it is. But the thing that I found that's most striking when I talk to other people in the early stages of their business plan or their idea, or even today, someone pitched me. That's kind of weird. I was pitching, investment, two presentations today to investors, and then I had one where it was sort of being pitched to me in a weird sort of way. And the thing that I'm struck about is the fact that it's rare that you can hear the idea articulated succinctly in under 30 seconds. And that requires a lot of thought. So I would say that when you focus on your idea and you've got in your mind what it needs to be, work very, very hard on developing what I call, the elevator label. I think that's absolutely key. And don't test it on your friends, test it on other people. If you can't deliver it in 30 seconds, 60 if you're in biotech or fintech, but work on that 60, 30-second label. I think that's absolutely key. The other point here is validation. It's all very well you having, and people, even including me, having this great idea, and you believe in it, and you know where it's going to go, but you've got to go out there and start talking to your audience. Now, first of all, it's free. You generally don't have to pay to get their feedback. It's quick. It's a constant process. You don't do it right at the beginning, and yet people still don't go out there and validate the idea as well as they should. And this isn't validation about telling someone how cool it is and why wouldn't you use it. Because I hear that all the time. Hey, why wouldn't they use it? This is super cool. Actually, that's not what you want to validate. You don't want to validate how good you are at selling or pitching your idea. You really want to validate whether or not there are any holes in it. So it's not why wouldn't you use it, it would be why would you use it? And I think there's a real subtle difference in that. So part of that process is listening as hard as you can to figure out if they aren't saying something or they are saying something to you, what do they really mean about that? And I would say that's absolutely critical, and it's critical throughout the whole life cycle of your venture. I did touch on listen. I got taught this at a very young age when I went into business. 2 of these and 1 of these. I know it sounds really basic, but if you ever listened in that ratio, right, and listened hard in that ratio, you're already 2/3 of the way to your goal, I feel. Now, commercial model. Interestingly, the pitch the guy gave me today, he really struggled with this one. The commercial model, in your mind, is critical unless, of course, you've got a very rich benefactor, you're doing something for charity, and you've already got your funding lined up, which I think is just pretty rare. So be really focused about that commercial model, and also recognize that that model is going to change over time. As things crop up along the way, and the stuff that you don't know that you now come to know comes to light, be ready to adapt that. So the key component and message there is don't just figure out that this is why you think someone should pay for it. Go back to that point about validation. Try and test that as best you can. And that brings me to the go-to-market. The whole point in my mind, and this is what I've learned about go-to-market, is that whether you're developing B2B or B2C, or something that could potentially be both, recognize that there are 2 very, very distinct processes that change. And Ollie and I were talking really just a few minutes ago about the importance of brand. In the B2C space, that's absolutely vital. And I'll come back to that in a little moment. But in the B2B space, I mean, if you're building a really smart, cool piece of biotech that you only need to sell to, I don't know, a couple of key professors or procurement heads in a medical faculty, that's all you need to sell to. The brand is less important, it's the technology, what's it going to do for them, which comes back to the commercial model. What problem is it going to solve? Who's going to pay for it? Why would they really want it? As opposed to why wouldn't they? When it comes to the B2C element, and we found this with Victor, brand is pretty much everything. If you look at the brands of today and you look at what sits underneath them, Coca-Cola is a great example of that. I mean, the product, the ingredients, anyone can get. But the brand has taken forever to build, and it means something in someone's mind. And when you go after the consumer market, that invariably is what you need to capture consumer imagination, get them on board, take that app or that product that you've developed, and actually get it to catch fire and really get going. So just think about the brand component. It's important. And if you don't have that expertise in your team, go find it, because that's really, really essential. Measure. It's easy to talk about that. One of the biggest challenges about measurement is that more often than not, you're not going to hit your goals, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't measure. And being afraid about not hitting your goals is the first biggest mistake, except that most of the things that you want to do, when you want to do it, you're not actually going to make it on time or to budget or anywhere near what you'd imagined. Because as entrepreneurs, you've got the imagination about where you want to go and what you want to do. But setting that out in a series of milestones with some strategic objectives, that's absolutely key, so that you can measure your progress, whether it's strategic, whether it's executional, whether it's bringing people on board, where you want to be in terms of a timeline with your NPV, absolutely critical. So the point here is that when you stop hitting those targets, and you will, it gives you a point of reflection. And that point of reflection allows you to assess whether or not, as a business, you should be pivoting. Because as you try certain things and it doesn't work, or they're not working according to plan, maybe you need to readjust your plan. So that measurement is vital. I know it's hard to look in the mirror and think, oh, we just didn't deliver this quarter, but actually it's critical to that process. And that sort of brings me on to perspective. When you're running and building your own business, and I know, I've done this a lot, you get so buried into what you want to do and where it needs to go and who you need to have on board, it's sometimes really difficult to take a step back. I think for me, one of the most important developments in my entrepreneurial career was getting a chairman on board. So whether you have the benefit of a board, a chairman, or a mentor, that process of stepping back and explaining to someone else where you are and what you're doing, not because you want them to tell you what to do, but because that discipline of me then now having to sit down with you guys and frame out what I've done and what I'm planning to do actually helps you organize, A, your mind, B, the priorities around you, and C, again, setting those goals and those milestones. So gaining a perspective and finding time for a perspective is difficult. Having a third party involved in that process gives you that discipline. And do be aware, they're not meant to be telling you what to do, they're meant to be creating that discipline and that environment for you to do that for yourself. I love this. A lot of people ask me about this word, good or bad, being paranoid in business, particularly if you're working on something pretty cool. You know what? Paranoia is great. You need it. You need to be aware that someone might be better than you. Invariably, just think that they are. They just haven't surfaced yet. It keeps you on your toes. If you look in the mirror every day and you wake up and you reflect on what you've done the day before, just think about, could I have done it better? Who else might be doing it? What's coming over the horizon? And keep your antenna up, because you never know what's coming around the corner, and that stops you becoming complacent. So paranoia is great in my mind. The last point that I really wanted to focus on in terms of mindset is the team. And, you know, I think I've had about 600 people through my hands in the last 20 years. And the way I look at it, sometimes it's a bit like being a schoolmaster. You know, you've got your kids coming through, you've got super bright people, you've got people with great ambition but don't want to put the hard work in. When you are in this startup mode, you know, the most important ingredient are the people. It's you and who you surround yourself with. And one of the things that I've tried to figure out is, am I trying to bring people on board and train them and teach them? Because that takes time. Or do I try and bring people on board with the same attitude that I have, who will work as hard and as long and will contribute as much? Because for many of us in the tech space, speed is essential. Getting traction, getting your product to market, then starting to get scale is a critical part of that. And if you don't get the right people on board, don't wait too long to make a decision to get rid of them. You know, I promised only one anecdotal story. I mean, Victor's been referred to in many instances now like the Uber of private jet travel. You know, I didn't refer to it. TechCrunch used the Uberization of everything. And if TechCrunch writes about me in that way, I don't have a problem with that. That's great. When it comes to people, though, and where we were as a business, I hired the head of product from the biggest competitor to Uber. This guy was like God. So I'm not going to tell you his name because he's just written a book and published it, and I haven't read about myself in it yet, and I don't know whether he's going to say good stuff or bad. But his book was How to Build the Billion-Dollar App. Right? So I brought this guy in who is, you know, God. He wanted to be treated like that, and he wanted free reign. After about 4 weeks, we were clashing dreadfully. For another 4 weeks within the company, I felt like I had a terrorist in my mix. My entire organization was falling apart at the seams. My senior managers were blaming each other, blaming me, you know, it looked like we were disintegrating, right? Because I had a guy that wasn't pulling in the same direction and wasn't working with us and was actually undermining a lot of what we were doing. So it actually, in the end, took a total of 10 weeks before he left, right? And, you know, guys in the tech world who know him thought, are you crazy? You let this guy go? And I said, phew, best thing since sliced bread. A lot of what he said was right, so don't get me wrong, he's a super genius, but he wasn't able to work with the rest of the team. And you've got to bear that in mind when you are picking your team. Act quickly if it doesn't work. Funding. What can I say about funding that you don't already know? You're never going to have enough. That's point number one. It's almost a constant process. You know, I feel in constant fundraising mode with Victor. I think we've raised in our 46 months, probably, and I'm going to do this in US, so I think that's almost the same as Euro now, isn't it? Give or take. I think we're probably just shy of about 18 million that we've raised in a whole series of tranches. You know, 1.7, 1.8 was what I put in to start with. I was fortunate I was able to do that. So that was my seed money. This was 2010 going into 11. You couldn't raise money. You know, it didn't matter what you did. If you could invent gold out of water, it was difficult to raise money then, really difficult. And then we did a friends and family round for about $2 million. Then we did a $5 million, an 8 million, and then now another 8 million. And I just feel like I've spent my whole life in constant fundraising mode. So, you know, do be aware that you need to raise enough to get you to the next key milestone, hence having milestones. You have to execute, you have to hit those milestones, else you won't get any more. And when you do get some more, you're raising just about enough to get to the next milestone, and then you raise again. Otherwise, if you raise so much early on, your organization ends up becoming corrupted by the sheer volume of cash that you have, and really enthusiastic guys who want to go and spend it everywhere on loads of cool things, which are called innovation. So, you know, don't get me wrong, I like the pressure, and I think the discipline of never having enough to do what you want to do makes you really do ask the tough questions of yourself. Is this really going to add value? So moving on from funding, these guys, investors. They're shareholders in your business. And some of the companies I've seen don't really get that. People have written you a check. They've invested in you. It's risk, right? Respect that. So operate with integrity. If you do that, as opposed to, well, yeah, they're the investor, they should know what they're doing. If you do that properly, you could get them to come back again and again for the next few rounds before you go institutional. And I know that with Victor. We've had a few rounds, 3, and I've had the majority of my investment from the same people throughout. So I've kept close to them. They've understood what we've been doing. They know the challenges, the traumas. We've admitted when we've got it wrong, and they've stayed with us through this process. So, remember that. They are making an investment not because they love you. They're making an investment, by and large, because they want a return on their investment, and they need to be able to see that coming. So don't underestimate that part of your job as a leader in terms of managing those expectations. That takes me to the exit. Right from the get-go, I personally believe you have to have a really good view about where you may exit. And it may not be one exit. It may be a series of exits in terms of when it happens on the life cycle and who it happens with. So don't ignore it. And it's fluid. And recognizing that it is fluid means that you've got to keep aware of the exit opportunities. That means you're also aware of the competitive threats, who's coming into market, who's developing a new piece of technology, who's acquired who, which changes the dynamic. And when one piece of dynamic changes, invariably you're going to find a lot more suddenly rattle through. So you could find an area that you're looking to disrupt that's been the same for 4 or 5 years. Something happens to this guy's company over here, and all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 acquisitions, there's 1 merger, and 2 people have gone bust. That might completely change your exit options. And I use the word options because I think you should keep options open and you should keep evaluating those options. And if you can, test them. There is no harm talking to who could become either a potential partner, a potential adversary, or someone that would eventually be an exit option for you. So I'm going to end with the last couple of key points here, which is for every entrepreneur, it really is about the attitude. All the people that put their hands up, your leaders, in your role as a leader, number one, it's your vision. Never look to anyone else to help, deliver that vision for you in terms of creating it. You are the guy and the girl in the front row. It's your vision. You have to deliver that. You've also got to motivate the hell out of everyone else around you to follow that vision. That is critical. So that needs energy, that needs drive, that needs a relentless desire to constantly question, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it? Is it the right thing? Is it going to add value? Is it going to help me get along these various key stages in my development path? I think the other thing, apart from ensuring that you're motivational to your team, is that you've also got to show some humility. You are going to make mistakes, no question. You are going to have a tremendous amount of setbacks along the way, right? But A, it's your job to motivate the team, and it's B, your job to be the first one to say, hey, I got this wrong, and be seen to genuinely, admit that you've got certain things wrong, which means that your whole team will say, hey, it's okay to fail in those instances. The worst thing is someone failing and not telling you, and you keep down that path for another 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And, for startup companies, 6 weeks is 6 weeks of burning cash, right? And you don't want to do that. So, the last point, it's tough. Heaven or Hell was the working title I gave this little chat. You've got to, at some point through your day or your week, make sure that you retain some opportunity to have fun and have a sense of humor. And if you can do that, then I think you'll get through it with a smile. So that leaves me now to Q&A. I think I've overrun my slot, Will. And I just also wanted to leave you with a thought. And this was a Rothschild quote. I think it goes along the lines of, whoever controls the purse strings, controls the power. And for you guys as entrepreneurs, it's your job to balance that power struggle, and it shouldn't be, but it's for you guys to balance that so that you can grow the company in the way that you want to grow it, so that you get the success that you envisage that goes alongside your vision, and then you can get the exit that you want to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Great statement.
Yeah, I'm going to get
Good.
water.
I want to take this chance. Actually, you mentioned a chairman and a mentor, and I wanted to introduce just quickly the chairman and mentor of Victor and probably both of us in a way, Alex. So Alex Sozanoff,
thank you.
Who kindly was able to bring Clive here to town. So I thought now we could have a kind of a rousing discussion, debate, and maybe if I could start with a question you kind of challenged with the work-life balance in the beginning, which has been a continuous. Why don't you go on this side? So.
Okay.
I mean, to me, it's been a constant kind of challenge, and because I think everybody believes in it. But, is it really possible? Elon Musk, I mean, there's been, I think Ollie was just showing a letter, a blog post from his wife, ex-wife, and she said he was,
success in itself.
And she said that he was about three things: obsession, obsession, and obsession. But what's your take on this? Because I think different people handle it different ways. Where do you go with that?
That's a really good question, and that's not the first time I've been asked that. And as an individual, I'm a obsessive compulsive. I will do, whatever it takes to get there. And I don't mean, cross the line of morality or integrity, because I think integrity is only something you ever lose once. So don't lose it, right? There's no way back, so just don't do it. But in terms of where I am with that work-life balance,
and how your team as well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's important, and there's a separation here because I think the entrepreneur is slightly different from his team member. If you have a company with 3 entrepreneurs in it, probably at some point they're all going to split off and do their own thing. But from generally my perspective, where I'm on my own and I'm doing that, and this question of work-life balance comes up, it never comes up in my mind. So I'm going to be really honest about it. The only thing that comes first, and I love my wife and my daughter dearly, is what I'm trying to do. They've always recognized that they're going to come second. Therefore, I don't have this struggle about work-life balance. It's never been a struggle. End of story. They recognize what I'm trying to do. They know that it's singularly the most important thing in my life. This company, this idea, this business, not because I want to make a lot of money, because I've seen... And in many instances with my shareholders and Victor, having an awful lot just comes with it a huge amount of problems, right? A huge amount. You need enough to be comfortable, but after that, you're into all sorts of issues. Do you want your daughter to inherit it all? What happens if someone comes to marry her and it doesn't last? All of these sorts of questions. Does he really want to marry her for who she is or because of dad's money? I don't want to go down that route. But for me as an individual, that work-life balance, I am really happy with what I do every day. And if I could stay up for 24 hours a day, I would. Right? I can just about stay up for about 18 or 19. And I'm getting on a bit now. But that's it. So today is the end of a 9-day road trip. It's wonderful. Tomorrow, I'll see my wife. That'll be equally wonderful.
Great. Audience, some questions or comments? Great. Rahul.
I wanted to ask you about the exit part, as you said. So at what stage in all your startups did you actually think about exit? When the idea came or when the first investor put in his money? Like at what stage you think about exit?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And in my early companies, I never did. Right? In my early companies, when I was in my late 20s and 30s, I didn't want to sell my train set. It was mine. I created it. Go away. I could never imagine selling it. I can understand the mindset of people today who think like that. But I think the moment you start to get shareholders involved, that changes. So ultimately for shareholders, they're not here to live your dream throughout the entire life cycle of your dream. As I said, they're here to invest in an exciting venture that they like, that they buy into, and at some point, they want their money back. They don't want you to lose it, and then they'd like a return. And the more risky stage that you bring them in, the greater the return that they want. And you know, where we are at the moment, we're closing the last of our high net worth individual investment rounds, and going forward in the next 6 to 9 months, we'll be in the institutional space. And that's going to be a whole different, you know, arena for us as we bring institutional money in, who themselves have a different agenda in terms of exit. But generally, it's driven by, you know, when you start to bring shareholders.
And then, one last question.
Sure.
Then do you drive the team for exit as a goal, or what is the motivation, what is the drive of the team?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what is the driver and the motivation of the team, and how do you keep them driven and or motivated when you determine your exit? Is that sort of it? Yeah. I don't think there's a one size that fits all there. You know, your tech guys, they just might want to build the greatest, slickest, most elegant, scalable piece of technology, and they don't quite get exit. So you might be motivating them with a different set of deliverables and a different set of rewards. You know, my tech team, we put them on a private jet and flew them to Rome for the night. They flew back EasyJet. You know, the following day, they got a dinner in Rome. The fact that they could tweet and blog that to all their friends and all their other programmers around the world was one of the biggest motivating factors going. So for others, you tie them into key deliverables or pure value creation of the business. So my C-suite team are all focused on hitting valuation points with the business, not because we think it's valued, but this is where funds come in. That's the hardest proof point of value, or when you sell the company. And that's where we've now motivated those guys. They get this chunk of shares at this price with this level of uplift if we hit 100 million, 200 million, and then beyond.
Question? Peter.
Where did you get the idea for Clive Victor?
Thank you. Out of pure frustration. So a lot of you guys in the room will have seen something that you didn't quite like, you figured wasn't being done particularly well, and you thought, hey, I can fix that. And you know, that's what I did with Victor. So you know, I had a holiday home on the island of Mallorca. And when I bought it, I thought, you know, semi-retirement, getting into my late 40s, I'll spend a lot of time down there, it'd be super cool. And not long after I bought the house, British Midland Airways, which flew from London Heathrow to Mallorca in under 2 hours, stopped flying. The same week, British Airways stopped flying. Right? So I'm on the last plane coming back, talking to all these regular faces that you know, because when you're doing it 14 times a year, don't forget I was getting ready for retirement in my mind. We all looked at each other and said, well, what are we going to do? And someone said, well, EasyJet fly twice a week in the winter. Yeah, but I work in London, I live, and my daughter's at school. You know, what do we do? So, you know, some guy said, well, you know, why aren't we sharing a private jet? And that's where the idea came out. And I thought if I could create a platform that allowed people to book, buy, pay, and share jets and buy seats on jets, then, and it worked London to Mallorca, Mallorca, London, then actually this should work, you know, I don't know, Santa Clara up to Truckee, Lake Tahoe, down to, you know, Cupertino, wherever. And that's where the idea came from. The fact that I happen to be in technology, building trading platforms and knowing how to build brands just made it a lot easier. Okay, I'm going to try and, you know, play that question back to you so I understand what is it that you were looking for, and then, you know, make sure that the audience get to that. So what you want to know is, from a fundraising standpoint, that when I go to look for investment.
Like some of your big problems and how you have solved.
Yeah. Okay, well, look. Okay, well, look, let me start with, you know, the issue of funding. And do you need to put money in as an entrepreneur, or can you start with an idea and then have to raise everything? I was fortunate with Victor. I was able to persuade my wife to say, look, I'm going to take something that's our future, you know, safeguard, our nest egg, and commit all of that in cash. This is not, sweat equity. This was real hard cash into that business. And then I went on to bring investors in. At the time, no investor would have made that decision to come to me and say, right, I am going to back you with an idea for you to build a global booking platform for aviation with financial settlement that's more advanced than Amadeus or Sabre, the commercial airline stuff, and you don't know the first thing about aviation. And I said, I know about automotive, but I don't know about aviation. So at that point in time, they wouldn't have done that. So I had no choice. If I believed in the vision, I had to do that. And at that point, it was incredibly risky. Now, today, you might be able to get someone to back, and I think the market has changed, so it is more likely you could get someone to back a venture that is still on paper. And the balance in terms of what you have to offer them for that risk that they're taking has to be commensurate with where you think it's going to go and that level of risk. So that's the equation that you then have to go through with your first, what I would call cornerstone investor, to get them to stand behind you. All my other companies, I've never had shareholders with. So, this is my first experience with shareholders. All my other companies I've set up and run generally without any borrowings, no debt, no finance, no hire purchase on chairs or desks or tables, just because I didn't want to see a burn rate being attributed to something or someone else. If I owned it, I didn't have it under finance, which means in theory it didn't cost me anything. So yeah, different world.
Yes.
You mentioned that some of your companies, they didn't really work out. So when and how did you know that it didn't work out and you should move on to the next venture?
Wow, that's a good one. I'm trying to think out of all of them. Yeah, sure. So when did I find out that it wasn't working and, closed it down or sold it off? I think if I just talk about one part of Victor, and then I'll move down to a specific company separate to that. Because I mentioned that, when I started Victor, the private jet share community was the strapline, not Fly Smarter. Buying seats on private jets, selling them to each other, great trading platform that we built. And I launched that on the 16th of August, 2011, on, no surprise, the London to Palma de Mallorca route. And I'd solicited a lot of, as part of my validation, I set up a focus group in Palma and one in London and invited some people on. These were the first 7 people that I met on that plane, because I left the plane with their 7 business cards. By the time I was in proper validation mode, I had nearly 100 people who had surfaced their intent to do something. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we launched in the high season. Actually, people sold and bought seats on private jets. It worked in the high season. The moment we came off the high season, it didn't work. And then I quickly realized that as we were coming back into a high season, just 1 or 2 or 3 key routes, Ibiza, Mallorca, Corsica, Sardinia, Nice, Geneva, Paris, that wasn't enough to sustain a business. At that point, we either thought we have to throw more money at it, right? Because we needed liquidity. And liquidity meant that if you wanted to fly to Ibiza this weekend, it's no good me telling you you can get a seat for £600, twice what you'd have to pay on Finnair if it was flying there, but I couldn't fly you for 2 weeks. So we just pulled the plug straight away. Another example of where I had to pivot really quickly was we took Victor into Russia, into Moscow. And we had 2 choices. We would either go in there and conduct a very detailed study and analysis of market opportunity size, partners, programs, etc., which we did in part, but we just dived straight in, rented a very cheap office opposite Orient Express Group, who almost gave it to us for free because they liked us and we were doing stuff with them. We put a couple of people in market, and then we realized the Russian market just was not open for transparency, And they also wanted to a lot of people wanted to get paid in cash there. So when my CFO said to me, look, I need to fly to Moscow with a case of cash to pay some people, I said, this will never happen, right? You know, and God help you if you did start doing that and then you got caught, you know, you're in a no-win situation. You either admit you did it and now you're in prison, or if you stop doing it, you're in prison, so just don't do it. So, you know, I had to say to the board, we were 5.5 months in, we need to be out of there. The fact of the matter is that then someone invaded someone and, you know, it was a good decision in the end. Okay. I'm conscious that time is, but I'll keep taking questions and you keep going. Yeah, please.
Something about having fun, and then you have fruitful crisis. So how do you build a culture that actually the team gets things done, but it's not only having fun, but not too much crisis, but balancing acts?
That's a good one. Well, if I knew how to control the crises, right, I'm going to sell that as DNA. You know, you can't. I think it's about attitude. You are always going to get hit with difficult situations, no question. And the thing to do is to just recognize that they are going to come, and your ability to progress as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and as a business is largely based around how you handle those challenges. So if it's like getting kicked in the stomach and you don't get up for 3 days, you know, that's going to hurt your organization. So the leadership that you have to show in that situation is critical to the rest of your team to motivate them, right? They know it's difficult, they know it's problematic, but they now look at you and you to figure out how you're going to handle it. Because if you step back up to the plate and you've got that energy and motivation and you've started to figure out a plan about how to handle it, you know what? They think, great, it's less to worry about. The part about the fun is that when you are very driven, your expectations of everyone else are the expectations of yourself. And I would say create a real clear differential between what you expect of yourself and what you expect of others. Yes, you'd like them to work as hard as you, but they never will be. You know, it's going to be very rare. They will not push themselves as far because they weren't the leader, they aren't the leader, they didn't have the vision. And if they did, they'd be their own entrepreneur with their own startup. So the fun element is twofold. One, making sure that when you drive yourself very hard, more often than not, you scare the living pants off them because they generally feel that they can never live up to your expectations. Because you can, you know, I'm 55, and like I said, I can do an 18-hour day. I've done about 9 on the trot, and the voice is only just coming back, having lost it last night. You know, when I look at guys who are a lot younger than me, I know it scares them, and they think, God, how am I going to live up to that? And I'm not expecting them to do that. So giving them the opportunity to just chill and kick back and have a little bit of relaxation is a key part of giving fun. It doesn't mean that they spend all day in the office with radio-controlled cars or helicopters. It just means there's a moment when you allow them to just lighten up about the challenges that you're facing. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's, you know, I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. You know, general team members, I'm now reliant on the guys that run or work these little divisions. I mean, bearing in mind, we went from Victor from 1 person, and now I think we're about 47. So I'm now reliant on people to create their own little networks, to plug into the social environment that they're in, and it's predominantly digital, to find out who and what they should be bringing on board. Do those people come with sufficient points of validation? And then to use the tech in the best way they can to pre-screen, pre-interview, video interview, you know, create those points of reference about those individuals, and then perhaps eventually start going through some sort of testing, certainly for tech, and maybe psycho, you know, where you want people to play a bigger role. I don't have all the answers, and I asked the same question last Wednesday when I was on a panel in Geneva at eBase. eBase is the private aviation show of Europe, and I was very fortunate to be invited to be the joint headline act with a guy from Uber. You know, Uber, for all you people who remember me talking about finding exit options, could well be one of my exit options. They've got a lot of cash, and they've just been announced to do Uber helicopters in Cannes for the Cannes Film Show. So, you know, they look like they're encroaching on my territory. So anyway, I shared this panel with this guy, and what I really wanted to know from him, amongst a number of things, was how do Uber recruit really smart people? Because they've gone through that stage of having lunatic young people, you know, wanting to put private investigators on journalists if journalists don't write the right things. You know, maybe in certain Eastern Bloc countries you can do that, but in the United States, if you do that, you're dead. So a lot of what Uber have had to do is backtrack and grow up. So again, you know, the rules here is please don't repeat this, but I interviewed the former head of PR and communications for Uber Europe, who resigned on the basis that she was fed up with dealing with kids, you know, who were really gung-ho and going out there and trying to, you know, make it happen their way and pushing everyone out if they didn't conform. So the point about Uber today is that they've just got so much better at recruiting smart people. And if I can learn from them, which he's promised me, he'll send me their little document, then I'll hopefully tell you next time if I get invited back.
One more question, Hanne.
So whether it's been heaven or hell, I guess it's more heaven. How would you repeat it, and what would you do different?
Well, the point I see about heaven or hell is that actually it's all heaven for me. Because if you just get used to the fact that you are going to face setbacks and challenges, and probably the biggest setback I had about 4 weeks ago was that one of my current investors who'd gone 3 rounds said, right, don't waste your time fundraising. I know you're doing a second closing. I'll write the check. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know who to call, my chairman, my CFO. You know, I sat in my office, pondered it, and he said, oh, well, then send me the cap table. Of everyone who doesn't know what a cap table is, just in case, shareholder register, what percentages you have. And the guy came back and said, actually, I've changed my mind, right? I'm going to give you $500,000 if you get another $1 million in, because you said all you really, really need is 1.5. You know, I wanted 5, but, you know, he said, worst case scenario, what would you live with? 1.5. He said, all right, get the other 1, you can have, you know, half. That's a difficult situation for me. It lasted all of about 3 minutes. It's just, that's it. Gone, get on with it. So it's heaven.
Okay.
Where else would I get a job like this?
Very good. Okay. Well, thanks so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.